can't do this alone. I don't care what other people say. You're not alone. I know they want you to feel like you're alone, but you're not.
This week, we are tackling the difficult topic of suicide as numbers rise at startling rates, especially among
young people of color. Notably, Black people aged 15 to 34 and Hispanic people 25 to 34 saw double-digit increases in suicide rates in 2020. Now, Jen, you also mentioned that 46,000 people died by suicide, but the CDC estimates 1.38 million people attempted.
You have kids committing suicide. You have people, a product of that. And people trying to figure out how are people jumping off buildings? How are people? Oh, they're just not strong enough. No, it has nothing to do with that. For so long, we've been told, like, be strong. And, like, don't share your feelings, don't share your emotions. That's not, we can see, you can see people can't take this. We have to be willing to go in and see it and feel it, and it sucks. My dad couldn't take it. You're not alone. You have to be vulnerable. That's the journey. This is the journey. The journey to being mentally shredded looks like this. This is how it looks.
My name is Christopher Whedon. I am the founder and CEO of the Mentally Shredded Foundation. When I first thought of the name Mentally Shredded, I specifically focused on my personal development journey. So thank you for meeting with me today, Dr. Terrell DeGans. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for inviting me here, and it's a pleasure to meet you.
So just to let you in on a little bit of my personal experience with mental health. And so I grew up in a small town in West Texas to a military family. My granddad was a lieutenant colonel and retired by the time I would think I was like 1 year old, but that structure did not retire. And so very, very disciplined in our education, very disciplined when it came to extracurricular activities. We were always involved in many things, church, etc. And so when you grow up in an environment like that and you're, I would say, middle class, which in West Texas is, it's not a very expensive place to live, not at that time anyway. So middle class was really good. Mm-hmm. And so I often found myself in environments where a lot of people did not look like me. It would be rare sometimes if someone did look like me. I grew up playing soccer, which already limited on people of color, but luckily I was in Texas. So as I got older, there were more Hispanics and different people. And I grew up singing in choir and different things. And so I would often be in environments where I would be referred to as, Chris is one of the good ones, or criticized for how I dressed, how I spoke, how I carried myself, literally down to a backpack that I bought, right? I remember purchasing an LL Bean backpack, and you would think, hell froze over because people that look like me don't buy a LL Bean. And so I just learned how to cope I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know the terms for it, but I slowly began to realize I didn't fit in anywhere. You know, I would get backlash from family members who would travel down, who I didn't grow up with, but they were from, you know, South Carolina or from Baltimore area or New York. I didn't grow up in environments like that. So growing up in the environment that I grew in, often referred to as, well, you talk white, or I wasn't expecting this when you showed up because on the phone you sounded like. And so when you grow up in this environment, you either become numb to it all and you hide who you truly are, or you just embrace who everybody says you are. Well, I embraced what everybody said I was until my 30s, right? Because I did not realize until my mental health actually started taking a turn where all of this was coming from. And I had been suppressing so much for so long that I had to go back and say, when did this actually start? When did I start bearing these things? Why did I not feel comfortable in certain relationships to truly be myself? And it all started back then when I just started putting everything down, pushing everything down. And realistically, and in all honesty, I was pushing my blackness down because I did not feel like it was accepted. But then I was also pushing down another part of me that wasn't accepted either, right? And so you're trying to figure out and navigate this world, which already has so much like so many challenges and so much coming at you, that I truly believe this was impacting my health at an early age, and I did not know it until I actually started doing the work, where I could no longer ignore the fact that I didn't want to get out of bed. I could no longer ignore the fact that I was anxious and didn't want to leave the apartment. I remember specifically having the first connection with someone, and I believe it was Ahmaud Arbery. And I'm a former soccer player. I often work out outside. I often go for long runs. And after that, after seeing what happened to him, I didn't even want to walk to the bars down the street. And I live in a safe, quote unquote, neighborhood. And so my question to you is, how do you feel, and what would you say from your professional standpoint, the impact that someone who has to navigate all of these different things and all of these different challenges, when you already have it's already tough trying to figure out who you are at a young age, right? What type of impact do you think that had on my mental health? And then how can people avoid that or recognize that this is something that happened to them and move forward?
Those are big questions. I'll first say this, that really connects with me for a number of reasons, but this not being an actual therapy session is really helpful, so I can self-disclose a little bit more.
Yeah.
That's what I think is very common in the Black experience when you grow up considered what is now considered to be educated, right? Because that's what the coding means. You talk white means you speak as if you're educated. And that is not a positive connotation when people say that.
Right.
The thing is, you are a product of your environment. And this is for everyone listening, no matter what you look like or what you think you are a product of your environment. The way other people speak is how you learn to speak. The way other people interact with you is how you learn to function in the world. And we are always who we are, but for us in particular, we're in positions where we have to suppress certain things that are possibilities for us that are not possibilities for others, because that is not the environment in which we are in. So in that suppression of our own Blackness, we're also suppressing pieces of ourselves that are options on how we can speak and when we can speak it. And when we finally get into environments where it is quote unquote okay to do so, it is somewhat liberating, but it's also confusing because is this who I am? Is this who I've always been? Or is this who I just can be in this environment?
Right.
And what if I were to show that part of me that's from somewhere else, right? Is that education appreciated here? And I think this speaks to a lot of Black people's experience, to the point where maybe you do this, maybe you don't, but I have different playlists for different neighborhoods that I'm going to be in.
Yes. Okay. I thought it was just me, and I definitely feel a different personality come out depending on the music. Okay, perfect.
Exactly. Right. But we have to make considerations for ourselves depending on where we are, so that we can feel like the people around us will accept us if they were to have a quick view of this. And the thing is, it's very difficult to say to a young person, and young meaning whatever you want it to mean, right? You are going to just function fine where you are, because no matter where you go, people will have judgments on what is acceptable for you. And one of the good ones means we can accept you as you are now. But we cannot guarantee we will accept you in any other environment. And that is a scary thought to realize and to hear and to have to internalize. But that is the world that we are in now. And that's the reality that we balance every single day.
Yeah.
And that's really difficult. But you will get better at it. We all get better at it. And you don't have to be ashamed of who you are, because the way I consider it is you are, in some sense, a nomad, a cultural nomad. I can live here, I can live there, I can live anywhere because I have that ability, and I'm not closing those options off. And knowing that you have that ability gives you way more strength than anyone else can ever imagine.
Yes. Wow. Thank you. And I received that. In the beginning, mentally shredded meant doing things that set you apart from the old you. Things like reading a minimum of 15 minutes a day, associating with people that elevate you, and listening or watching things that build you up. I remember a time when I thought no one thought like me. I looked around my family and friends who all seemed very content with their lives, working a 9-to-5, raising a family, and living the so-called American dream. I realized at an early age that I wanted something different. I wanted control over my life, my finances, my mental health, and my day-to-day. I wanted to be able to roll over each morning to my beautiful wife and ask her, "What do you want to do today?" and the opportunities be limitless. Once I began reading and listening to podcasts, I quickly found out that there were thousands, even millions of people that wanted exactly what I wanted and were doing something about it. Over time, it began to transform to what I had personally experienced in my 30-plus years. At 31, I began to experience something I never imagined, and it took over me like a flood. I had briefly experienced this feeling in my 20s, but this felt different. Sometimes I felt like I was drowning or couldn't breathe. Sometimes I didn't want to get out of bed and would go into seclusion. I knew I needed to seek help, so I decided to speak with a mental health professional to talk through what was going on with me, and realized this was the perfect example of being mentally shredded.
Today on mental health and why it matters. Okay.
Awesome. Yes, thank you again. So mental health and why it matters. Who in here has had their own personal experience with mental health or knows somebody that has had, raise of hands, show of hands. Okay, cool. So everybody here has at least known someone who has experienced some sort of mental health issue. Who in here is currently in therapy or currently speaking with somebody to seek help? Show of hands, we have 2 people. Awesome. What has that been like for you?
It's been challenging finding the right person. So a lot of my mental health issues come from traumatic experiences when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
So I struggle with PTSD on a daily basis.
Okay.
And trying to find someone that not necessarily can relate, but help me with some of the coping mechanisms And I've probably been in therapy on and off for like 12, 13 years now.
Okay. Thank you for sharing. And it takes extreme vulnerability to share in a setting like this, so that means a lot. Thank you. So before you two sought therapy, what was the first thing you did when you felt like something was going on? Did you reach out to friends and family first? Because I know for me, I always have this go-to person that I can call and just dump everything on, right? And then I recognized that was not good for the relationship. So I'm just curious, what made you say, okay, I want to speak to a mental health professional instead of speaking to family or friends?
I didn't speak to anyone. My difference maker was I was stopped from committing suicide by one of my friends.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you. Man, there's a lot of...
There's a lot.
Yes, man, I want to unpack so much. That's awesome. And both of you would say it's been impactful for your overall mental health. Perfect. Have you seen a correlation between your mental health and other areas of your life now that you have been speaking to somebody? Yeah? What would you say is the biggest...
Trying to be more, what do we talk about? Emotionally intelligent.
Ooh,
Yeah.
I like that, okay. Thank you all for sharing, because that really means a lot. So I just want to touch on my experience in mental health and what it's done for me, and then we can talk a little bit about why it matters. I think we've already touched on why it matters. It's helped save your life, right? And it's helped repair your just overall well-being, right? So my story starts in 2017 when I moved to Charlotte. Beautiful place. I moved here in 2016, and I was like, all right, Chris, when you went to college, you're the upperclassman. I played soccer in college, so the upperclassmen are like, Chris, you're this choir boy, straight edge. If you want to have fun here, you're gonna have to lower your standards a little bit. And I remember being like, all right, why not? I'm 21 hours away from home. No one knows me out here. Let's do it. And so I moved to Charlotte in 2016, and I'm like, Chris, you never raised your standards up, and college is long gone. So it's time to grow up. And I remember my dad always saying, when it's time to grow up, you'll know. As you become a man, you start putting away childish things. And those words ring loud in my head every single day. And so for me, I started this journey, and I was trying to figure out who I wanted to be, who am I? And that's probably one of the biggest things, one of the biggest questions that we have as human beings. And so for me, well, real quick, let me ask, when you were a kid, I would say around 8 years old, you remember what you wanted to be when you grew up? Everything? I want to be everything. I love it. Anybody have a specific?
I wanted to be a lawyer.
Lawyer? Okay.
Psychiatrist.
Okay.
I think it changed for me 20 times. I think at one point I thought I wanted to be a marine biologist.
Yeah.
That was my big thing. And then I was like, I want to be a fashion designer.
Ooh.
Actually, I want to be an actress.
I think that's fair. I think that's fair. When you said everything, I was like, you know what? That's perfect. That's a perfect response. So I always wanted to be a professional soccer player. Now, with that, I think all these other things popped in. I was like, man, I'm good at singing. I can see myself on a stage one day. Me and Taylor Swift would be really best friends. And that was later in life. But so that was my goal. And so I would put pictures, and I would put all these affirmations, which I did not know I was doing at the time until later in life. But my whole wall was completely covered in soccer and affirmations. My brother's side of the wall was covered in nothing. And so, which is funny, because if you get to meet both of us, our personalities are completely different. But so I was doing this, and I was putting myself in this space this whole time without actually knowing it. And I'll touch on how important that actually was here in a second. But so I moved to Charlotte, and I'm like, okay, Chris, what are you good at? Like, I already know, like, I can write affirmations, so let's start writing this journal. So I literally started writing down 9 things every single day, starting in 2017. Wrote them for 3 years straight, didn't change it, the same 9 things. It's evolved over time now. But for me, I knew I already had this piece, right? So it was like, what can I add on to what I'm already doing, which will pour into our discussion of why mental health matters. And so I'm writing these affirmations, and I'm pouring all this stuff in. I start listening to podcasts. I start listening to positive things. One of my favorite people is Eric Thomas. I actually started listening to him when I was overseas living in Northern Ireland in 2012. So, and I was lonely. And so I was like, okay, well, I need something. And so I just found him. I don't even remember how. And every single day I just started listening to him. And it's funny because now I wake up every morning, the moments I don't want to get out of bed, I just put on Eric Thomas. And I'm like, all right. Like, it's like emotional, like I turn it on and I'm automatically just ready to go. And I know there's gonna be days like that. And so you have to figure out what works for me as an individual to say, this is what I know I need at this moment. This is what I know will get me to where I want to go in the future, right? So I start my second career. Professional soccer didn't work out the way that I wanted it to, but I was able to travel the world, and with that came anxiety, financial issues, different things. So I was like, okay, I have a business degree. Everybody said, this is what you should do. So, all right, here we go. We'll give it a chance. 3 years in, I find myself as a regional manager of a pretty big company. I'm traveling all over the place, have every corporate perk you can think of, corporate card, literally driving whatever car I want, and I'm making a lot of money and I don't really know where it's going. And obviously that comes into the financial issues, right? And so I have somebody take me aside, take me under their wing, and they say, Chris, show me your budget. And I was like, what's a budget? They were like, okay, that's an issue right there. So I show him, what I had going on. He's like, you're spending like $800 a month eating out. And I was like, am I? Is that a lot? He's like, yeah, that's a lot. And I was like, okay. So I start getting my finances in order. So now not only am I continuing to pour in, I'm starting to take advantage of this mentorship financially, right? And so now I'm like, okay, remember those pillars I mentioned at the beginning? I was like, I'm shooting 2 for 4 now, all right? And then spiritually, I know my faith is a big thing, and we're in a corporate setting, so we won't really dive into that. But I did what I needed to do from that setting. So now I'm shooting 3 for 4, and things are progressing. Things are moving along. I wake up one day and I'm like, okay, the next step is director at this company. And that dude is not going anywhere for a while, right? Yeah, I'm pretty sure everybody, if you're like me, you're like, I want to climb the ladder, I want to continue to move up. Well, if I was going to move up, I was going to have to go somewhere else. And that put a little stress on me. And I was like, Chris, are you even happy doing this? And I wasn't. And I had to be honest with myself. I was like, yeah, I'm making good money. My family's happy. I can send money whenever they need it. But this is miserable. And this is not what I feel like I'm supposed to be doing. So I pivot. I start working locally here in Charlotte. I'm not traveling anymore. I have friends that got me a job at Avid Exchange. I don't know if you're familiar with that company. Good company. Start January 2020, same year, the same month I start my podcast, and then COVID hits. And so I'm like, oh, well, this is nice. So 3 months in the office, and then now we're at home. And so the beauty of transitioning to home was like, I live in a townhome with 4 guys, and we're all bachelors. So it was actually kind of fun in the beginning. and we would work out and we would do all these things, and we had our plans in play for each of us, right? Like, okay, we can't go anywhere legally. How are we going to come out of here stronger? Because we at least had the mindset to understand that there were going to be some people that were going to create businesses during COVID, or that were going to progress and take off during COVID. So we did that. And we all had our own individual things, but I think as much as we partied, we were grinding at the same time. And so it was cool to have that setting and those individuals that were making you better. The issue came in when my mental health took a turn. And so July of 2021, I remember being like, or June of 2021, it was for my birthday. I remember being like, I'm not doing well. And I knew it, and it was just like, even waking up and rolling over now to even open up the computer to dial and do all the things, I was like, I don't want to do this. And I started expressing to my management team, hey, there's something going on. I have no idea what it is. And at the time, I don't remember if there were things in play or in place for us to take advantage of corporately. And so I felt like I was alone on this island, and I didn't know what to do. And so I take a vacation. I'm like, okay, well, that's what vacations are for. Let's take a little trip, go away for a week and a half, come back, should be reset, refreshed. I come back, and as soon as I get back on a Saturday, we know what Monday is, right? Got to get back to work. I have a panic attack on Sunday. And I was like, that's not good. And so I just tell my boss, I'm like, hey, yeah, I don't think I can do this anymore. And I had no plan. Like, I had literally was like, where's money going to come from, right? Like, where your business isn't even established. You have like literally no foundation for anything right now. But I was like, I know my mental health is way more important than this job. And if I can get this together, and if I need to go back and find a job, I will. So I put my 2 weeks in, and I was like, as soon as I did that, I'm filing paperwork for my LLC. And so I did that. I had Mentally Shredded put on a shirt the year before, I think in 2020, because I think we were all just coming up with our own little brands and little things, and people were like, just throw it on a shirt and see what happens. And so I put Mentally Shredded on a shirt. And I remember my granddad being like, that's pretty cool. Like, what is that? And my grandma was like, what does that mean though? Are you shredding paper? Like, are you? And I was like, what? And so that took me down a path of realizing that it's all in your perspective, right? Mentally Shredded became me telling my story, became my journal, if you will, of saying like, this is where I'm at. This is where I'm going. If you want to follow the journey, this is it. And I couldn't be more raw than that. And I started recording things and being more vulnerable. And you slowly start seeing people remove themselves, right? Because they don't know what the heck's going on. And I didn't know how to communicate what was going on. And so I became a recluse as well. So in the same time they were starting to remove themselves, I was like, cool, I need to protect myself. And so I stopped answering my phone. I stopped going out. I stopped doing all of the things that are not good for your mental health because we know we are better in community. And so fast forward, it's October 2021 now. I lose my dad, my granddad, who raised me, and my hero at the time due to COVID. And so now I'm dealing with anxiety, depression, grief, and I'd never dealt with any of this stuff before. And I'm like, why am I dealing with all this now with no job, with an idea of something, which I'm not really sure what it is, and now I don't want to get out of bed. But the one consistent thing I kept doing was I kept going to the gym, which if you study mental health, most people stop doing that. But I had been so trained and so programmed to just get up and do it, regardless of how we felt and regardless of the weather. And the day after my granddad passed, I'm on the squat rack with tears coming down my face. I think I had like 225 pounds on each side, or not on each side, total, right? And I'm like, physiologically, this is not supposed to happen. You're not supposed to be able to cry and exercise at the same time. Like if you Google it, it says that you're broken. And that's how I knew my foundation was now destroyed, because I'm now defying the odds of whatever rules are out there. So I seek therapy. Ding, ding, I should have done that way before. I seek therapy, and I'm glad you brought this up because my first therapist was not good for me. So I always encourage people to shop around, right? Like, you don't go you don't start dating people and say, yeah, you look good, let's go. It's like, no, you need to shop around a little bit and make sure this is actually what I want to do for the rest of my life. Obviously, I think mental health is a journey. This is something you're going to do for the rest of your life. And as you grow and as you progress, you'll understand what works for you, what doesn't. And so once therapy started, I started to begin to see all of the things that I was doing to impact, my own mental health in a negative way, right? So I started turning to substances. I was drinking more, not every day, but I was drinking more than I normally would. I was smoking weed way more than I normally would. And so I just started looking for an escape. And I'm not telling people that any of that stuff is bad. I'm just saying, for me, I was using it as an escape. And anytime we use anything, it could be exercise. If you're using it as an escape, you're not getting to the root issue. And so I recognized, okay, Chris, you're on this personal development journey and you want to be the best you can. How do you do that? I need to be vulnerable. I have to actually start opening up and saying, hey, I'm not okay. Hey, I need help. And what's funny is people actually start reaching out and saying, hey, I didn't know all this was going on. Or your family, when you reach out and say, hey, this is happening to me, and they're like, you know what, this is happening to me as well. I'm struggling as well because of the loss of our dad, or I'm struggling as well with depression and anxiety. My family's not one to talk about that stuff, right? Like I didn't even know mental health was a thing for real. It was always, go pray, you'll be all right, go pray about it. And I'm like, all right, well, that's not working anymore, so I need something else. And so for me now, it's 2023, still no job, still really unsure of what I'm doing. And I always tell people, like, yeah, I don't know what I'm doing. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I have this idea to inspire change. I have this mission to change the stigma in mental health and empower people through personal development. All things that I've been working on, all things that I know I'm good at, and I'm good at connecting with people. And so I came up with this idea to do RX for mental health. It was a workout, community event, and then we had a licensed therapist come in and lead a discussion. After that event, I was thinking about all these things that were going wrong, because it's my first event. I'm like, I hope people enjoyed it, whatever. People came up and were like, hey, I didn't know that I needed that discussion. And I was like, huh, that's different. They were like, yeah, no one's doing this. Huh, and the light bulbs start going off. I'm like, I think I found something. And it's led to different conversations, and that's where we're at. We had our first annual event, and I speak like that intentionally because that's just something I'm going to do forever, as of now anyway, right? That's the beauty of being an artist. I believe each of us are creating our own lives, and so you have to look at yourself as an artist. What do I want to create for the future? Who do I want to be when I wake up? How do I want to represent? Because if you have children, our children are watching us. If you have friends, your friends are watching you. And if any of them are crabs in a bucket, might want to start, removing some of those people. But for me, it really just came down to, I know I want to be better, and I have to do something, and no one's going to come and save me. And for so long, I felt like it was a burden, that I had this pressure to succeed at a high level. I had this pressure to be the successful one in my family, because I knew it was going to come down on me to take care of everybody, and that's how it felt. And I used to complain. I remember I used to literally complain, not to other people, but to, I'd drop on my knees and I'd pray and I'd be like, why am I dealing with all of this? And I remember just hearing this still voice, and not audibly, but just through my mind, it said, Chris, if not you, then who? And I was like, I can look around my family and recognize that no one is vulnerable enough to change. No one's vulnerable enough to admit that something's wrong. Well, here we are, and this is the journey to becoming mentally shredded. I appreciate y'all for letting me share and for letting me be with y'all today. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, so Tina and I met at Community Matters Cafe, and so hearing about your story, about your son's journey in mental health, I'm just extremely grateful for us being able to connect and us being able to share why we are so passionate about this. And so let's just touch on the why.
Well, I didn't know much about resources and mental health and the importance of it until after my son died. And that it's heartbreaking, really. It's heartbreaking, but I was determined after he died to be able to help other people. And when he died, and actually we did the service, we decided as a family that we were going to tell the real story. That he suffered with bipolar, that he had substance use disorder. And when we did, the feedback we got was tremendous, even at the service. Because of the stigma of mental health, we didn't tell anybody about Nick's struggles. He was 17 when he started drinking and smoking pot. And that escalated. We were concerned and we got him some help for that. But over time, we learned that there was more to it than that. And that there was the bipolar issue, which made sense to us. But he didn't want that label. He would have rather been an alcoholic or a drug addict than to have a mental health issue. And isn't that sad, right? It's heartbreaking. It's just, so we didn't tell our parents, my husband and I. We didn't tell our friends, didn't tell my best friend. He didn't want anyone to know, and we kept his confidence in this. But in doing that, we isolated ourselves, and we isolated him, and looked for treatment on a very one-on-one, crisis kind of way. And so he died when he was 29. So he suffered with it 12 years. Went to numerous rehabilitation centers, off and on medication. He died tragically, which is another story. But after he died, and we had that response, to honor him, I really wanted to learn more and to know more. And really the goal is to help reduce the stigma of mental health, so that a young person who is struggling with, it could be an eating disorder, it could be drugs, it could be anxiety, depression, that they're able to recognize that and to be able to vocalize it, and for there not to be this hidden way of getting it taken care of, that it's out in the open and they receive the resources that they need. So that's a long answer to your question, but it's a very complicated issue. And I feel like over time, especially with the pandemic, time has kind of shifted, and I think we're headed in the right direction. You know, you and I are having this conversation.
Yes.
You know, and so I think that in itself, and talking about it and letting people know it's okay. You have to take care of your mind just like you take care of your body.
Absolutely.
The fact that I can sit here with you, Chris, now and talk about this and not be a puddle on this concrete is an amazing thing to me. And it's amazing the way God works and that we're sitting here. And the reason I do this and I talk about him is to honor him. This is what he would want. He wouldn't want it to happen to anybody else. He would want to spread the word. And I think that he would be happy we're doing this. He'd be happier to be here. But, you know, he's looking down, giving me strength to do this and to carry on in his name and to try to educate and support and help even just one person. If I can just help one person that it doesn't happen to, then that will be a good thing. I'd really like him back, but that's not in the cards.
I can tell that he's looking down and watching over us and is here in this conversation with us. So I thank you for sharing his story. And I hope by us doing this just sheds light on the importance of ending the stigma and providing the proper resources and information